Hey guys, Matt Jones back at the UN Memorial Cemetery in Busan. Just wanted to pick up on two quick stories. I'd hoped to come I'm here at 4 p.m. and there was a lowering of the UN flag yesterday at this time, and I arrived just at the tail end of it. So I thought there might be the same thing today, but there's not. So I'll just get straight into these stories. First one's about this guy here called Madden George Cross, from the 3rd Battalion. Says he's died on the 6th of November 1951. Private Madden. I believe he was taken prisoner during the Battle of Kapyong and died in captivity. He certainly maintained a fighting spirit through to the end. The accounts are quite sobering. The two books that I've got don't have details mentioned of his service or capture or death. One's written about the RAF, so it wouldn't contain his information, and the other one is written about with the Australians in Korea, and so it's a bit of a overarching perspective. And with the number of casualties, I don't think it was possible in that book to cover all of them. But it's interesting to see the layout in terms of the time when the cemetery was first, bodies were first assigned to the cemetery. So, for example, down there on the other side of this Australian tablet, which is where Charlie Green's grave is located, along with a lot of the other people who died during 1950 are located down there. And then on the far side of that group are some of the people from 1953 onwards. And then you've got another group here, which goes from the front backwards, again from April 1951 during Kapyong to those who died up around, I think, 1952, maybe 1953. Between those and what we've got at the top here are the graves of the Turkish soldiers. So it's sort of, in some regards, sort of bittersweet, given the connection Australia and Turkey have with Anzac. And of course there was going to be a service in April 1951. A delegation of Australians were going to visit the Turkish organisation to pay their respects for an Anzac service, but Kapyong and the Chinese 5th phase offensive intervened. But I just want to come up to the back here. This is where the flag was lowered the other day, and there's three graves I wanted to mention. Two, the names I've sort of spoken about before, but Harrop and Strout. So Pilot 3 Harrop from the Royal Australian Air Force died on the 3rd of September 1950, aged 25. Squadron Leader Strout died on the 7th of July 1950, aged 29, Australia's first casualty. The next to them, Wing Commander Spence, DFC and Bar, was also awarded, I think, an American medal posthumously. Died on the 9th of September 1950, aged 33. And these two, Harrop and Strout, were interred here on a service on, I think, on the 18th of January 1951. So their bodies were recovered around or during Christmas of 1950 by Edmund New and a guy called Sergeant Tom Hedison, who was an expert in search and recovery. And Strout's body was up in Gangwon-do, and Harrop crashed his plane about half an hour out of Daegu, returning from a bombing mission, escorting bombers into Pyongyang. He was running low on fuel, but before he could make the airstrip in in Daegu, his plane caught fire. He ejected with his parachute, landed on the ground in his white flying suit, smothered himself in mud, apparently unharmed, ran into a nearby house of a village. The planes he was flying with held some sort of escort above, awaiting a helicopter to come and hopefully rescue him in the area, but when they arrived there was no sign of him. When Edmund New and Tom Henderson found his body, there were quite a number of bullet holes in him, so whether he was sort of executed or whether he died fighting, we don't know. But it must have been quite an occasion, a very sobering occasion, with them being buried here. Apparently there was a pilot's helmet at the end of each grave, and the members of the squadron, 77 Squadron, filed up after the bodies were buried, stood in front of the helmet, saluted, and moved along. Wing Commander Spence was the commander of 77 Squadron. He died during a mission where they were napalming a village, and because of the low cloud cover, he came in for a steep dive, and his plane was unable to pull up from the dive, and he crashed into the village, and there was no way he would have survived the crash. I'm not sure how his remains were recovered, but I understand that his body was buried here a short time after those first two. And then it continues on, sadly, with other men from the 3rd Battalion, beginning with the 21st of January and continuing right round to the Battle of Kapyong, 24th of April. The thing I wanted to leave off on was, I made a few mentions that, to my mind, the amount of attention we've given to the Korean War has been less than what it deserves, and that's partly part and parcel of how the military is remembered. Once in a while, the nation stops and gets into the pageantry of something like the centenary of Anzac, but it's not enough to sort of maintain the legacy, which is largely fading from history. I'm provoked to do something about that, remembering the actions of a guy called Daryl Kelly, who I knew as an RSM of mine back in the day. Subsequently went on to get commissioned. A great guy, really inspirational, and he had a thing in the Army Rag called, I think it was called something like They Served, or I can't remember what it was called, but he basically looked at the lives of people who had, I think they were Victoria Cross winners, and he detailed their life, their actions, their citations. And so what I might start undertaking is a progressive telling the story of the names of the people from Australia who are buried not only in this cemetery but in other places, and also those who are missing in action. I think it's a contribution toward that. It will spark a conversation, and it's probably the most realistic way that I can affect change in that regard. It's not the only aspect about the relationship between Australia and Korea, but it's something I can do. Today's the 30th of January, so it's the 30th day in this, what I'm calling 100 Days to Harvest, in this journey exploring the friendship between Australia and Korea. I'll probably return to the Korean War at some stage in the next 70 days, but I've given it a good amount of coverage. It's not about how much it deserves, but not that I'm leaving it behind. I'm going to pick up these stories about those who are deceased from the Korean War, and you know, I think it's appropriate to continue to remember that as well. Thanks for listening. Very poignant seeing these graves together, knowing how they've ended up here. What's interesting though is Harrop, Strout and Spence probably all crashed their Mustangs because of faulty aircraft. That must have been an extra blow because of the how the squadron was held together. When I say faulty aircraft, what I mean, for example, in Spence's case, the aircraft just couldn't handle the pickup out of the steep dive. With Strout, we don't know exactly what happened in terms of the cause of the crash. And Harrop, the plane catching fire prior to him having the ability to land with only about 30 gallons in the tank. Such is the nature of war.